Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Star Revelations with Maria Jones and Morgana Sophia. It is brilliant to be with you today to share everything that we know about astrological alchemy for the Aquarian Aeon. So before I go any further, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Maria Jones. Welcome, Maria.
Hi, it's so exciting. Our very first episode.
An episode of starting for many, I think. So, part of the
Absolutely.
podcast and the reason we've been talking about this for setting it up for quite some time is about harnessing the magic of astrology, how it can help us really alchemize our shadow, how it can really help us move into what some are calling the age of Aquarius and what you and I would call the Aquarian Aeon. It's really about harnessing that and using this podcast to dispense and disperse our knowledge so that we can really help you move through what is, how shall we say, very curious, choppy waters at the moment.
Mm,
So, as we come into this Aquarian Aeon, I thought it'd be really great just to start talking a little bit about what is the Age of Aquarius, the Aquarian Aeon, and how did we get to name these? And maybe just have a look at the precession of the equinoxes, which I know, Maria, you're a bit of an expert on. So, if you could just tell us a little bit about the precession of the equinox and how we are moving into this new age.
yeah, so as we were discussing before we started recording, it's always a little bit of a contention point, isn't it, when one aeon becomes the next. And there's always a window of transition, which is very chaotic here on Earth. And this is the place where we really find ourselves at the moment, in this energy of, deep alchemy as we move from the tail end of Pisces, of the fish, into this new aeon of Aquarius. So a precessional cycle is understood by what sign we witness the sun rise in at the spring equinox. So around every 2,160 years, this sign will change. And there's always discrepancies, and people have different ideas and opinions about when these things occur, due to the calculations of signs and the different sizes of constellations. But what we can see at the moment is that the sun is rising in the tail end of Pisces at the equinox. So she, over the next couple of hundred years, will make that transition into Aquarius. So this is a key time for humanity. This is a key time when we are choosing the frequency that we will carry throughout the next cycle, which is going to last another 2,160 years. So, for those of us who are called to understanding these cycles and walking these paths, it's really important for us to understand and know where to focus our energy during these times, which is another reason that we've decided to, start sharing this a little bit more widely, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because transition period is going to be really pivotal in whether we decide to choose the highest expression of the Aquarian Aeon and the lowest expression, excuse me, of the Aquarian Aeon. And I
Mm,
think what would be really good illustration is to go and look at where we've been in the age of Pisces and how we could have had the highest expression. And actually, we as a whole collective have actually chosen really what can be incredibly low expression of Pisces, essentially. So if we look at Pisces and when the age of Pisces started, which for me was the
mm,
coming of Yeshua and his equal consort Magdalene, excuse me, it was
yeah.
really the highest expression of
Mm,
spirituality, of compassion, of the disillusion of boundaries between self and God, really compassionate, having this spiritual unity, which was demonstrated through the relationship between Yeshua and Magdalene. And yet, for me, the age of Pisces has become dominated by those who decided that the divine union, the Hieros Gamos, if we
Mhm.
want to call it, between Yeshua and Magdalene, was not to be, because the lower expression is very much the use of guilt and shame to control, and the use of guilt and shame around who Mary Magdalene actually was from Yeshua's consort. She has been literally thrown, as I've said in my book, onto the heap of whoredom because she
Mm.
was a woman, and because no one at the time when the ages turned could accept that someone could be equal to a man as well. So we've really gone through a very turbulent 2200 years ish. We don't know when Yeshua was truly born. Very, very turbulent, where unconditional love has actually been used for conditional control and unconditional control
Mm.
at times as well. I don't know what you feel about the age of Pisces as we're kind of getting to the end of it.
Yeah, so we truly jumped into a distorted timeline, is my opinion. I mean, we had this great magician and priestess who incarnated and literally shifted the fabric of time. We as we've been learning in our own studies recently, the whole definition of human time is related to the incarnation of this one person. And yet, the message was so incredibly distorted. Instead of us using the Pisces energy to see the divine in each other and within ourselves, we were taught that you had to go through a priest, that you had to go through a church for absolution, for your connection to the divine. And of course, all of these figures are very masculine. As you said, Magdalene was cast aside. I love that phrase, the heap of whoredom. That's brilliant. Um, and of course, we no longer had a triad. We no longer had a god and a goddess that gave birth to the divine son or daughter. We, just had these male images
Mm.
that we were taught to worship. So it's very interesting because in a lot of modern rewrites of mythology, Magdalene does become the equivalent of the Holy Grail. Her womb is the Grail, or she's very symbolic of the Grail. And as again, you and I have been discovering in our own studies, this symbology of the Grail is incredibly important for the Aquarian Aeon. In astrology, Aquarius is the cup bearer, the chalice bearer, or the Grail bearer. And in the kind of apocalyptic text, the apocalyptic biblical text written during the age of Pisces, we have from John of Patmos, who interestingly, somebody told me recently was on mushrooms when they wrote this, and I can
Isn't
believe
that
it.
live in the cave? Apparently, had psychedelic mushrooms, didn't
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Apparently he was blind, so he was seeing all of this with his inner eye.
they?
So yeah, maybe a true prophet who was seeing all of this imagery. And of course, the most iconic imagery that we find in that text is of the Whore of Babylon, or Venus, Inanna, who is coming forth on the seven-headed beast for the seven deadly sins or seven classical planets. And in her hand, she holds the chalice or the grail. So we know somewhere in Christian mythology or Piscean mythology itself, this return of the goddess as the grail bearer, this Aquarian Aeon energy was actually prophesied.
Mm.
So as we come into this Aeon, we are seeing the reclaiming of the feminine in a much deeper and more multifaceted way. So we are seeing her in her wholeness and fullness now, I believe.
I,
Yeah, I'm sure you have
I
some thoughts on that too.
No, absolutely. And, we just because we're astrologers doesn't mean that we don't study. I think that's the one thing that people think that, oh, this is what you do. But, we extensively study outside and around the topics as well. And for me, this reclamation of goddess, this reclamation particularly of Babylon, has been incredibly insightful for
Mm,
someone who has been brought up very much in the Church of England, who was very, until I was about maybe 27, actually still regularly went to church, to actually reclaim the feminine and to truly go through my own personal shifts where I have understood how Magdalene, so, and I'm encapsulating quite a few women in the Bible as Magdalenes, as well as these the high priestesses
mm,
of Isis, the Essenes, the women who practice sex magic, who practice rejuvenation magic, to actually do your own research and realize that everything that we've been told may not be truth. And I'm not saying everything I've read has been truth, but it's opening the eyes to the capacity and the capability that we have as women to be sorceresses, to be magicians, but to also understand that in front of the creator, whoever creator is, whether we believe that is male god, female god, doesn't matter,
mm,
that we are all equal, but also part of that creator as well. So it's been a real eye opener, and this reclamation of claiming the divine feminine back, whether it's been through studies of Babylon or studies of Goddess, has been really
mm,
deeply empowering and for me actually quite life changing. And I know we had a conversation the other day, but suddenly, I used to be a real red lipstick and red nails girl when I was in the corporate
mm,
world. I dropped all that when I came into the spiritual online space
mm,
because that wasn't done, but I'm reclaiming her again because that's actually who we are. We are these Scarlet women, for want of a better phrase and saying, who are
mm,
claiming their own divinity, their own sexuality, their own power again. And the fact that we know what our roles are as we go into this Aquarian Aeon, to be the seers and the oracles of what is to come, to be able to really lean back into that power is incredibly powerful. So for me, it's been a complete 180 from, used to go to church to
mm,
actually, do you know what? I am going to follow some of the practices of Caroline Lovewell as a prophet of Babylon,
mm.
to really go through the Eucharist in a very heretical manner, honoring Goddess. So
Absolutely.
they're really my thoughts. It's going to be a really potent time, and the more that we release that divine feminine within ourselves and realize that we are all aspects of creator, source creator, goddess, that I think is going to really be the catalyst for the change as we come into the Aquarian Aeon.
Absolutely. We have to take these rituals, which in themselves are much more ancient than Christianity. They're much more ancient than Pisces. In fact, a lot of this um, goddess devotional energy, a lot of these temples to goddess were built during the Aeon of Taurus, right?
Mm.
And that's where we really see the first imagery of Inanna as of Venus as Inanna, who then becomes this whore of Babylon. So it feels like what we're reclaiming is much more ancient. It's almost like we're taking back what they took and distorted
Absolutely.
and bringing it back to life. And I think the goddess is life force, Babylon, Venus, hello, Truffles. She is life force itself. And that is so important for us to stay in touch with during this Aquarian Aeon, because we know that the potential shadows for this Aeon are very much to do with disconnecting us from our humanity. Every age, at the turning of every age during these chaos points, which I think is what I'm going to call this transitional period, these chaos points where all new life is birthed from chaos, but we have a choice. Are we going to accept the distorted version of the zodiacal frequency like we did with Pisces? Are we going to let the same thing happen with Aquarius? Are we going to come into this energy of oneness, of remembering that we are all sparks birthed from this chalice womb of Goddess? Or are we going to go into this technocracy? Are we going to go further into what we might call the matrix? And this is another one of the shadows of Pisces, which the astrology of 2026 really says to me that we're going to be moving beyond these illusions, actually. But first, we have to see the illusion. First, we have to recognize we're living in an illusion. And that is what the astrology of this year is really bringing, I think, in many ways. I know we've been studying and talking about it in depth, haven't we? These transitions that are happening through the final degrees of Pisces this year, really starting off very profoundly in February, actually, with some big conjunctions around the North Node in Pisces from Neptune and Venus. So it's almost like we have to become aware of where we are in these Piscean shadows in order to break free, because Aquarius is, of course, liberation. So we're in this really powerful time in this kind of chaos portal, and the astrology of this year is really, really calling us into this self-autonomy and self-empowerment, which I think is a big part of us embracing this Aquarian energy.
Yeah, and just really feeling into that. Obviously, we've got Saturn and Neptune kind of dancing around the anaretic degrees of Pisces, moving into Aries, coming back out again to really make sure that we've dissolved everything that held us back. But for me, also, I'm just kind of thinking ahead and the shadows of the Aquarian Aeon, of this groupthink, of technocracy, but also this ability that Aquarius has sometimes to get really caught into that group think to get caught into fanaticism, to forget to become the hive mind, and to forget that, as you say in a lot of your work, that we are an individual thread, yet within the weave of the collective consciousness. And I think at the moment, particularly if we look at the geopolitics of what's going on in the globe at this moment when we're recording it on the 22nd of January 2025, there is a real interesting kind of weave at the moment, because we have the people who say and hopefully have disconnected from the matrix, standing in their own sovereignty. We've seen that since 2020, but we're now seeing the groupthink and the fanaticism on all sides, because we're not going to discuss any politics here, but on all sides, which are creating this real polarization, which means everybody then goes onto their technology to see what the other side is saying and what their side is saying.
Mm,
And then that for me is the drip feed of the groupthink, which would be very much the shadow, which I feel this year, as well as kind of dissolving the Pisces energies, taking off that
mm,
veil from our eyes to see what now, before anything else happens, is our reliance on our phones, on technology, on our smart meters, on whatever else.
mm,
Because actually, that
absolutely.
is going to be the control mind, the hive mind, if we're not careful.
Absolutely. So in the Piscean Aeon, we were kind of shepherded into religious doctrines which kept us locked down. And at this Aquarian choice point or chaos point, we've got the same option with technology, with all of this AI, with cryptocurrency, with all of these new things that seem to be accelerating at an extremely rapid rate since Plutonia has gone into
Mm.
Aquarius. Some days I look at my news feed and I feel like I'm living in some sci-fi film that I watched in the 80s, with the robots and all of these things that we've seen in our imagination but are now in our reality. So my my thoughts and feelings on this is that we cannot stop the evolution of technology. We cannot stop evolution itself. So I feel the way that we really take our power back is by using these Aquarian technologies in ways that expand consciousness rather than enslave it.
I love that.
So these amazing tools that we now have, it's what consciousness are we using them with? Because again, we were having this discussion recently and before we started recording about the phone screen and the algorithm being the black mirror. So,
I love that.
you know, when you have your phone and it literally does look like a black mirror,
Yeah.
and you've got the algorithm feeding back to you your consciousness in a way because it's reading you and it knows you. So it's a great tool for shadow work. It's a great Plutonia and Aquarius tool for shadow work. And I think what we can see playing out on the main stage as well is this, yeah, this polarization.
Mm.
And every good magician or sorceress knows that the reconciliation of opposites is what actually leads to soul growth and expansion. So we've got this great opportunity, this great moment of extremes. And I think this is being really enhanced by Jupiter in Gemini at the
Mm.
moment as well. So she'll go off into Cancer in the summer, which will create a bit of a shift of energy. But at the moment, we have this amazing opportunity to see our own shadows in the ways that we are projecting things out. And the algorithm is a continual friend that feeds it back to us.
Just thinking of my algorithm now, I'm like, oh, really? There's and we were discussing earlier as well the things that really come up, and if you use that as that black mirror, wow, I still have a lot of work to do. I think it's about as well embracing that shadow work of realizing we have to do it and then actually going to do it. And I feel this year, we always say Scorpio season is shadow season, but for me,
Mm,
Scorpio 2024, that season never really closed. And I think it's
mm,
continued on through the winter. Yes, we're going to the beautiful festival of Imbolc, of welcoming back the light, but it's almost as if we're going to have another year of really diving into the shadow if we are prepared to be the alchemist, if we're prepared to meet the two opposites, if we are prepared to, really sit in that dark void and face not just our shadow but also our golden shadow as well. So for me, the golden shadow is the nuggets of amazing unique ability that we have that we hide from ourselves because we fear we're too powerful and we fear being seen as well. So it's that for me will be the alchemy as well of actually,
mm,
clearing through our own subconscious, superconscious programming, but then really bringing forward our innate abilities as well. So it's going to be for me, I really feel that it is the year of shadow work. I don't know how you feel. You're probably a bit more cheerful about it than I am.
probably not, because we're both in our Pluto square Pluto, aren't we? And we both have a Scorpio stellium anyway. We're not the most cheery of souls at the best of times. But you're lucky because you have a Sagittarius moon. Even my moon sign is a little bit grumpy over there in Capricorn. But we are also both Aries, aren't we? So we're
We
both
are.
attuned to this kind of 0 degree Aries energy,
Mm.
which is also coming in. And I think the element of shadow work that we're all feeling is this energy of these planets, Saturnia and Neptunia, moving through the final degrees of Pisces. Because these final degrees of the entire zodiac are the degrees of karmic release. So it's really us looking at what needs to be cleared within us from all of these previous aeons, so that we can move forward into that 0 point Aries, which is
Mm.
pure potential. And the interesting thing about this to me is that Pisces, we both have Venus in Pisces too, don't we? So we're not hating on Pisces. But Pisces doesn't really know itself that well.
Mm,
It's indefinable by its very nature. Yet Aries has a very strong sense of self. She's the first sign of the zodiac and she's Mars ruled. And this is a Mars year. So
mm,
this is about empowerment. And as you said, to touch and recognize your own power re requires a lot of shadow work, especially in a world that seeks to keep us disconnected from it.
absolutely.
Yeah. The world seeks in every way to keep us disconnected from our own true nature. So it's this constant process, isn't it, of digging and reclaiming. And I think the great thing about Aquarius is that it is about community and connection as well. So I feel like for us, especially as women, the best way for us to touch and have that power reflected back to us is to be in circle with other powerful women.
Mm.
So I feel that's a different face of the Aquarian goddess that is emerging, this ability to be in an equal circle. And I know you talk a lot about this in your book, so I'll hand that point over to you.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, so when I was writing my book, it's very much about how we take the starfire, which burns within us, that aspect of goddess, that aspect of ascension, whatever you want to call it, that divinity, and how we really burst through, break through the matrix. And I've called us New Earth leaders, Age of Aquarius, Aquarian Aeon leaders, however you want to badge it. But essentially, it really meets about us understanding and finding our own power and understanding that leadership is no longer that pyramidal structure that we're used to. So, when you and I used to go to work back in the day, you worked for somebody who worked for somebody who worked for somebody else, and the kind of pyramid started to
Mm,
be created. You were often in a team of, say, 10 people, controlled by two people, one person, then another person at the top. It was very, very hierarchical. And as we move into this Aquarian Aeon, it is about sitting in circle, literally. If we look to the myth or legend or true story of Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, we see that they all had equal status. Even though Arthur was the
mm,
king, every single knight joined him at a round table, and every voice was heard, listened to, and respected. And as we move into this Aquarian Aeon, whether we're meeting in circles of women, whether we're meeting in our communities, whether we're meeting on our online communities, it is about going into this very circular way of leading. And I had a long conversation about this with somebody who's just went, oh, it's basically communism. And I went, no, it's not. It is about, at times, people in that circle actually stepping up and leading. So, for example, we're in a circle, yet we know I've got a legal background and there's a legal matter. So I may take the lead on that legal matter, but on another matter, I might pass it to you or another woman in the circle who has
mm,
the knowledge and the expanse to take the action to move it forward. It's not about never agreeing, it's about this beautiful ebb and flow of how the leadership really works in a very circular system. But there'll be times when we are at the peak of our leaderships and times when we naturally step back to let another lead. But everybody's voice is equal within it. It's a very abstract concept, and whenever I've explained it to people, they've gone, oh, it's very utopian. It is, but it's also a lot of hard work because it also means you have to face your shadow to sit at a table where everybody's regarded as equal without judgment, without prejudice as well, and accept that everyone has got a different view and to love them for having that different view, being able to disagree, yet being able to walk out of whatever meeting, that circle, friends, sisters, colleagues. It doesn't matter. It's a concept that sometimes even I, when it was really channeled through to me, kind of struggled with it for a while. But then it does make sense if you drop it really into your heart and really think about who you are and how you want society to live. It makes sense. We're all equal, And no one is more equal than the other. Just at times, another person may have the skills, a meritocracy essentially, to lead and take the action that needs to be taken. So, that for me is how I see those Aquarian circles really going. And picking up on that point about the power of women meeting in circles, we've seen an explosion of women meeting in circle, but it's about having the right facilitators to really create a cohesive movement of change, not just sitting there, sipping on a cup of tea, having a natter. It's about finding the divinity within to really create change on so many different levels, social, global, political, economic levels. That is going to be the challenge, I feel, for me.
Absolutely, because I think another thing that the end of this Piscean Aeon will bring up is the shadows within the spiritual community, because we know there is, I know it's your
My
favorite
favourite
subject.
topic.
I know it's your favorite subject. But me and you, we've both been kind of through the love and light cycle, haven't we? We've both, dived into that over our years of studying and various trainings and things that we've been immersed into. And I know my own journey around that was huge. When I realized the illusion that can also be within these kinds of communities and practices as well. And I think the times when we could kind of bypass or love and light things is over. This Aquarian energy requires us to face ourselves, to do our deep shadow work, our deep alchemical work, which, from our experience, we know that astrology is an amazing tool for that. So that's one way that you can really do that work within yourself. But it really feels to me like any structures that are built on hierarchy or illusion are going to start to lose their glamour, because that's Neptune Pisces too. They're going to start to lose their glamour, and they're going to start to lose their draw, because people want authenticity. And you can only be authentic when you've embraced your shadow, hey, when you've embraced all of yourself. And here's Twinkle. Cat number 2 coming to say hello. We might get Lilith before we're done. We might get
We
the
should
hatchet.
explain we've both got cats. So Maria has 3 lady cats. I have a boy cat. They often join our conversations, particularly when there's important things to say. But I think I agree with you about the illusion, the sparkle. I see Neptune in Pisces as kind of shimmering through in this beautiful kind of teal, sparkly sequined dress, kind of shimmying her
Mm,
way through, but leaving this trail of kind of destruction behind her as Saturn then comes in to kind of do the sweeping up and the real deep dive. And I
mm,
see her sort of laughing at the moment slightly because she's kind of leaving a trail of illusion at times, and sometimes she's moving, she's kind of doing the dance of the 7 veils occasionally.
she's a
But I really,
shapeshifter.
exactly, and I
Mm,
really feel that this illusion, and I think this is a whole other top kind of podcast hour probably, but it is about
mm,
seeing beyond and realizing that the age of the guru, whoever you see your guru as, we were talking about this about yoga, has really got to dissolve with the age of Pisces. And it's about us finding our own sovereignty once again and really stepping forward as a leader, regardless of where we feel we should be, because you can be a leader in any aspect of your life. And if Pluto and Capricorn took the wrecking ball through the kind of the banks, the systems, the matrix kind of conglomerations, Pluto in Aquarius is the wrecking ball through the spiritual community. And I'm already just from the work that I'm doing, just starting to see very hairline fractures coming through where this true power is just starting to break through, and where being in this space of illusion, this Neptunian illusion, is, you're right, losing its glamour, very much so.
yeah, because Neptunia herself, in these final degrees of Pisces, is coming to the end of, I'm going to say, 165-year cycle. But if you know me, you know that I always get the Neptune fog about around Neptune cycles. But it's a very long cycle. She's been in Pisces since around 2011, which is her home sign. So this is really amped up, with remember the whole 2012 Ascension Gateway stuff and all of these things that have been so present in the spiritual community. So she's bringing a lot of these cycles to completion as well, with Saturn on her tail. And Saturn is very much the opposite of Neptunia. If Neptunia is this kind of glamorous mer goddess, Saturnia is the wise old crone that's, chasing behind her with the stick, telling her to come back down to reality. So we've got a lot of collective illusion that needs to be dispelled in all areas of life. And that really starts within us, doesn't it? It looks at where we're deceiving ourselves, where we're sabotaging ourselves, where we're looking outside for a savior. All of these Piscean things, where we're addicted, where we're victimized, where we're addicted to helping others. It's that whole, the whole mythos of the Piscean age is built around a man sacrificing himself for our sins.
Yeah. And
So,
that just reminded me of a brilliant yoga teacher, a creatrix actually called Anna Forrest, and I did quite a lot of forest yoga and
mm,
have read her book quite a lot. And she takes that sacrifice of Yeshua very much into the home and into our life and calls us the sacrificial horse because we serve everybody else rather than serving ourselves, which means that we have lost that innate ability to step into our own power because we're too busy in service. And you and I both know with having Venus in Pisces, we can get a little bit too helpful sometimes. We can kind of, these fiery
mm,
women drift round being kind of loving unconditionally and wanting to help everybody. But actually, who is that helping? If you want to help everybody, who is it really helping? It isn't, is it helping them? Or is it making you feel good about yourself to mask the
exactly.
shadow?
Exactly. That's the point of reflection, isn't it? Who would I be when I am not in service? And
Mm,
whether that's to your family, to your clients, to your students, to your workplace, or whatever is your favorite way of kind of martyring yourself. Who would I be without that? Because this shift into Aries is a whole different archetypical frequency for the feminine, right?
mm.
Because Aries is this Mars warrioress. I'm going to put myself first kind of energy. Aries has a very bad rap for being selfish, but most women could do with learning how to be a little bit more selfish. And that's one of those taboo things that we don't like to recognize, isn't it? That's one of the key shadow workplaces. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just nodding along. Absolutely. When
Mm,
you say, actually, I need to put myself first, well, you can't do that because that's selfish. But is it? And you're right, it's a very taboo topic to put yourself first, to really allow yourself to be in charge. And I was speaking to someone the other day who wasn't very well. And whenever I'm not very well, if I've got meetings, I generally rock up, I'm generally there. And I was so proud of her because she put herself first and she says, no, this is what I am going to do. This is the plan. I went, I could learn so much from you because although we're both Aries, and for anyone listening, there's about what 48 hours between our dates of births, not very much at all.
mm,
We are very much conditioned to be in a place of sacrifice, of service to
mm,
other people, of actually remember to be a good girl, remember to go to church, do your homework. This is me, by the way, probably not you. You're slightly more rebellious than
Yeah, I was always naughty. I never went to church.
No, I never was. I was quite boring. Take me to get into my 40s to be a bit more interesting. Um, you put everything else first. You're always polite. Make sure you follow the rules. Make sure you do this. When you're at school, you do what you're told.
Mm,
You never truly find out who you are because you're so socially conditioned to be put in the good girl box. And I think we need to, at some point, prize her out and actually allow ourselves to put ourselves first. And that is going to be uncomfortable. And I can feel myself moving in my seat because it feels physically uncomfortable for me because it's not how I've been brought up.
yeah, yeah. It's really, really interesting, isn't it? And I think the human ego likes to define itself, doesn't it, by its beliefs. So that's why people get so incredibly angry when you challenge what they believe to be true. So if your identity, if your belief system is very much focused around helping others, being the good girl, then your whole identity has to shatter in order for you to really step into that Aries energy. And that's not to say we want to completely disregard anybody else's feelings or emotions or, disconnect completely, because that's shadow Aries. Ideally, we want to blend the two, don't we? We want to bring that Pisces compassion into Aries, into the self. We want to be able to be compassionate with our boundaries, whilst we honor ourselves, because the only thing that is going to create any change on this planet is people becoming self-aware and self-actualized. There is no politician, no spiritual leader, no religion that is going to be the savior here.
Yeah,
It's only through people doing the inner work to raise their consciousness, which will shift this timeline into the Aquarian future that we want to see. So that's why there is so much effort made to keep us in such extreme polarization.
absolutely. And it is all about self mastery, isn't it? For me, it's about however you see it. Some people will be say, oh, it's like being a walking ascended master. It's not, it's about the mastery of self, of really truly understanding and realizing that you have the influence to move the timeline. And I think that's the key
Mm,
thing that we forget is that one person is powerful, but a collective group can really shift the timeline. And I know we're so miserable, but if we don't really start to raise our consciousness, if we don't live from our hearts without fear, loving unconditionally and compassionately, but with boundaries, and understanding who we are and our power, then we aren't going to shift the timeline. And at the moment, I really feel we're at that tipping point and havering between timelines. So we're multidimensional beings. Who's to say that we're not living concurrent timelines? That's probably a whole other conversation. But we
it's a
really
great
have to,
one.
I know, write that down. But we
Wow.
really have to think about our power and tipping that balance into what we want to have. Not just, it's not about theory anymore, it's about practical grounded action.
Absolutely. It's just really interesting to me that the cats are running around because, of course, the opposite Aeon to Aquarius is Leo. So Leo is our balancing polarity, the feline energy, right? Which is very embodied, very creative, very human, and very sensual. So it feels like, it's a reminder that we are also human as well, that we have to really stay in connection with our humanness throughout these shifts. And I think that's the main thing, isn't it? It's to keep that connection to your heart despite everything that is going on around you, but also with the awareness that we are in a time of great transition, a time that has been prophesized by many, many great seers, magicians, mages, priestesses over the aeons, and we're here living it. So I think the real revelation is going to be what we do with this incarnation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
again, in the current spiritual climate, there is a lot of focus on manifestation and materialism. We've touched on this, and this will probably be another episode too, but none of that stuff is coming with us.
No.
The only thing we're going to take is the level of consciousness that we have reached. And the only thing that we can really develop mastery over is ourselves. And we've got another cat come to join us
I was
now.
literally saying, as you said, the age of Leo, the door was broken down by George. So they
Twinkle.
always want to be in the energy whenever we're talking, whenever we're in circle, they're always here. But you're right, it's about remembering that we are still wearing this human spacesuit and we have to enjoy ourselves as well as being super spiritual and wanting to move it. And you're right, the materialism isn't coming with us. We can't take it when we shuffle off this mortal coil. And what are we distracting ourselves with by wanting to manifest? What is it a distraction for? And I guess only a person can answer that themselves if they're prepared to look at the algorithm of the Black Mirror.
It is. And I think it's very much that polarity of, yeah, we're in this Aquarian age of transformation, but we want to find the balance, don't we? We don't want to take that guilt and shame, that poverty consciousness from Pisces.
Mm.
But also we want to, when we're doing our manifestations, we take the whole into consideration. So it's like, how is what I'm creating, how is that benefiting not just me, but my whole community, the people that are close to me? So it's coming from that perspective, isn't
Mm.
it? Not of, I'm going to sacrifice all my worldly belongings. We'll leave that in Pisces. um, but yeah, I think there are many levels and layers to this shift, but we just wanted to give you a little bit of an insight, didn't we, today? A little bit of an introduction to some of the themes that we work with in our personal lives, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just to kind of show you how we work, how we think. We are often sparking ideas off each other, and it's just to really open people's eyes, and especially we've got the new moon in Aquarius coming, because show you how you can think outside the box as well, that there are different solutions to everything that's going on. So I think that's a really good place to end today's conversation. It's been a pleasure as always, Maria.
Been really
And
fun.
we just want to thank you from both of us for listening to our conversation. You can, of course, subscribe to us on Substack. Hopefully, this will be on Spotify as well. And do feel free to reach out if you've got any comments and suggestions about what you want to hear us talk about as well. And it just leaves from me, Morgana, Sophia, and Maria, to wish you a very beautiful day whenever you are listening, and we'll speak to you again soon.